We got Gators Breakdown here. We know we're business.
Gators Breakdown, because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
The Gators Breakdown podcast is ready to go. I am your host, David Waters. You can find me on social media at GatorDave_SEC. Coming at you right here Monday night. Co-host Will Miles at Will Miles SEC. You know what? I gotta get the look at there. I gotta get the names up. Boom. Simple fix. There we go. Hey, if you weren't watching live, you know what I was talking about. But if you were watching, you didn't. Maybe you didn't even notice anyway. But anyway, Dave, Will, right here together on Monday night after Florida beats Kentucky 48-20. No game this week, so we can kind of concentrate on this one a little bit more and talk about maybe some of this stuff that can carry over. Will hopefully will carry over. Will for these Gators and an explosive offense we saw Saturday night. First time we've seen some fireworks like that in an SEC matchup. And, of course, this it was what Billy Napier calls it, a resilient defense, the improvement we've seen from those guys the last 3 games since the last bye week. We'll get into that a little bit, too. So we'll hear from Billy Napier from his post-game, after the game on Saturday against Kentucky. But, Will, 48-20, I read your article. You really did some great jobs detailing DJ Lagway's play and some of the plays Florida was running and took advantage of a Kentucky defense. We'll get into all that this episode, but as you said, I think toward the beginning of that article was, man, it's been a long time since we've seen something like that for Florida versus Kentucky anyway, but any SEC opponent, putting up points like that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think everybody knows Kentucky is not the best team in the SEC, but Kentucky hasn't been the best team in the SEC the last 3 years, and they've taken Florida behind the woodshed a couple of times and certainly have been the physically dominant team. And I think that's probably the thing that I think about in terms of like what impressed me the most about this win is that whether you're talking about Florida's defense or you're talking about Florida's offense, they physically dominated Kentucky in this one. Now, look, I don't think it was like a complete domination.
Say that again.
They physically dominated Kentucky. I'm not sure a Napier team is physically maybe Tennessee last year.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a game where you'd say, but even then I would say it was the first half. Like this is one where
so South Carolina 2 years ago.
Yeah. And again, I memean, if you want to nitpick, I mean, Lagway threw 3 passes in the second half. Now, granted, they were all bombs and he averaged 37 yards pass. So, a lot of good things happening at the quarterback position as well. And quite honestly, I have some stats for bye week at some point that I'm going to get to this week, where basically as the quarterback goes, Florida goes. And so I think that's going to be the story for the rest of the year probably. But look, I mean, Florida couldn't dominate anybody up front on defense for 2 years and 4 games. And then they have a bye week, and all of a sudden these guys like Triquez Bridges and Aaron Gates and Jack Pyburn and
Jaden
Robinson and Pup Howard. Like Howard's been good all year, but those guys have really stepped up and have become starters, right? Those are the guys who've taken over. I mean, I don't think we're going to see DJ Douglas in more than a backup role at this point. Given the fourth down tackle that Bridges made on the outside. I mean, literally, I at that moment when Bridges made that tackle out on the outside, I remembered there was a time last year where we played Georgia and Florida threw a little swing pass to the outside and Georgia's defensive back came up, wrapped up Florida's wide receiver and wrapped him up for a loss. And Nick Knudsen texted me at the time and he goes, "When's the last time Florida brought somebody down in the flat like that?" And I was like, "I don't remember." And then I'm sitting there watching the game going, "We got one. We got one. We took a guy down one-on-one where if the guy hadn't gone down, like if he hadn't made that tackle, it's a first down. That Kentucky drive keeps going and this game looks a lot different. They get the goal line stop, which I think everybody sort of glosses over because Florida in like 3 plays was all the way down the field in the other direction. And so I think in many ways that goal line stop is overlooked. Plus, I'm pretty sure that was an early whistle on that one. But irrespective, they get the goal line stop. I mean, again, when's the last time Florida had a goal line stop? Utah in the swamp is maybe the last time I remember a goal line stop. Yeah. And that one certainly changed the tide of that game too. I mean, I don't think Florida went out from the shadow of its own end zone all the way down for a touchdown to put that one out of reach, but it certainly turned the tides in terms of on that second half.
It was the game winner interception with Amari Birdie. That's what it was.
That's the difference. There were 2 goal line stands in that one then, because I'm thinking about the one.
Oh, okay.
The Bernie one happened on my end because I was in the stadium on that end with Max. But on the other end of the stadium, they had a 4th down stop there. I think it was in the 3rd quarter.
Yeah. I know what you mean. Kind of like the smash mouth goal line stand.
Yeah, I mean, the goal line stand where you got Voshawn Joseph coming and making the LSU quarterback not know where he is for a couple of plays. Like, when's the last time we had a Florida stop like that on defense? And they didn't.
The only ones that come to mind to me, you go back to we lost the game, but 2018 Florida Georgia, when Georgia had like 8 plays on the goal line, and Florida stopped every one of them. But I think
they kept getting pass interference calls.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's been a long time. And I mean, last week I said this. I was like, it's kind of fun to watch a defense that's good. And I honestly, Kentucky actually wound up from an offensive perspective exactly where I thought they were. I picked Kentucky 23-20 in this game because I thought Kentucky's defense was good. I thought DJ Lagway would be inconsistent. I didn't think Florida would be able to run the ball. And when you combine the inability to run the ball with a little bit of an inconsistent play from your quarterback, I was like, okay, this one could be awfully close. Now, look, I mean, if Kentucky pounds that ball home after the interception, the game is very different. But at the same time, after Kentucky comes down to make it a 1-score game, if Lagway doesn't hit Dike on those 2 big passes, I mean, those are big-time throws. If he doesn't hit those 2 throws, then the game's a lot different too. So, look, the offense looks completely different with DJ Lagway as the quarterback. And we sort of got a preview in the Tennessee game, though I'm not sure we knew it, where it was going to be sacks where he's trying to go downfield and doesn't have time. There's going to be some ill-advised scrambles. There's going to be some throws into like triple coverage. And anytime there's a hitch, you're going to be like, no, don't throw it. And then all of a sudden he's just going to launch a laser downfield. And you're going to go, I hope somebody's down there. Oh, look, he's wide open. The ball, I mean, I'm not sure he could have placed the ball any better on some of those throws down the field. I mean, they were just gorgeous throws down the field. He made a lot of very solid reads. Kentucky made it kind of easy on him because they play a lot of cover 3, and Florida clearly came in prepared for cover 3. So anyone who wants to criticize Napier for his play calling has to give Napier some credit on this one. DJ Lagway was prepared to take the shots when Kentucky decided they were going to play single high safety, and he was able to hit it a lot. And every play I diagrammed in my article, it was a cover 3 or a single high safety type of look. Maybe they had man down on the outside with the wide receiver, but there was that one safety. It makes it an easy read for the quarterback. And every time he had that read, Lagway was able to do it. In fact, the interception was one where post-snap Kentucky changed the coverage, and they went from what looked like a cover 3 to a cover 4. And all of a sudden, oh, there's a safety standing right in that hole. So at least I think that's what happened. So look, really fun game. It was fun to watch. It's been a long time since Florida's had a dominating game. I mean, I went back and looked at Napier's history. We had Vanderbilt last year. That was, I think like a 24-point victory or something like that. And then if you go back, it's South Carolina 2 years ago is the last time Florida really had a dominating SEC win. That was a game where Spencer Rattler just looked like complete garbage, and somehow he's starting for the Saints now. But I mean, there have not been a lot of times where we've been able to say, oh yeah, like Florida just absolutely dominated that one against an SEC opponent. So I don't want to overlook the fact that that is a progression this team has taken, right, especially considering what we saw against some. We've sort of seen high quality teams, and then we've seen
yeah.
And that's going to be the question, right? Is we got a bunch of high quality teams coming up, and is this a mirage against those teams that are kind of meh, or has Florida really taken a step forward? And boy, are we going to find out.
Yeah, I mean, and I've said, look, at these last 3 games, do I think Florida's a better team? Yes, I do think Florida is a better team. That still doesn't mean you go beat Georgia, LSU, Texas, and all those teams. I really do believe in my heart of hearts Florida is a better team than what they were a month ago. But that also plays in part to how hard the schedule is. And look, it may not equal wins. That's why they'll go play the games. But everybody, hit that like button right here on Gators Breakdown. Good conversation going on right here. So smash that like button. Subscribe right here on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform as well. Keep that conversation going on Gators Breakdown Plus and the Discord there. Link is in the description. Get those ad-free episodes of Gators Breakdown too. So, all right, let's go back to Saturday night. It was late Saturday night after the night game there. Let's hear from Billy Napier. He'll talk about DJ Lagway and Elijhah Badger and the explosion of this Gator offense.
Just DJ, just his big play propensity. I think 7 completions. I think he averaged like up 37 a completion.
Yeah, 191 quarterback rating, I think, which is definitely winning football. It created some explosives. maybe one black eye was the pick, probably forced that one into coverage, but made some plays with his feet too, and that gets overlooked. But the read element in the run game, and then there were a few where they covered us and he scrambled and was able to make some plays. He's only going to get better with, and obviously the work that he does between Sunday to Saturday contributes to what you see out there.
How important was that to just get those long passes opening up the running game? Because I thought that was a very key factor in what you were able to do offensively.
Yeah, we felt going into the game that maybe there was a lack of respect for the deep part of the field. And it turned out to be true, and I think obviously Badger had an incredible day. I mean, some just elite catches, finished one off there on third down, but just his ability to make the contested catch, the vertical threat, and then obviously DJ laid those in the basket. Those were elite throws. So we knew that we had that. That was the plan going into the game, was to really challenge him with three-level shots. And we didn't land some early, but then it started to work. So definitely contributes to the run game.
Will, I said it in my preview last week. You said it in your review. But what I liked about the performance, we finally got a performance from the quarterback position against a Kentucky defense where Kentucky didn't dictate what Florida did. Florida was able to finally dictate Kentucky there. They played their cover three, and Florida would just, in the past, just live in that world of dink and dunk and no explosives and just let Kentucky's defense dictate the game. Not this time. Lagway able to stretch the defense, take advantage, open up the entire offense where Jaden Ball's got 5 rushing touchdowns. He and Jacoby Jackson average about 5 yards a carry against a pretty good Kentucky defense there. Lagway himself with some good runs. And even with only 7 completions, we got a glimpse of just how explosion can go a long way. What I want to go to in this is the touchdown drives and the explosives, and the turnovers contributed here. Billy Napier talks about complementary play here, but a lot of these are due to the explosives and the touchdown drives Florida had. That 21-point explosion in the second quarter. The first touchdown drive was a 3-play, 65-yard drive, aided by a 50-yard pass to Badger. Second touchdown drive, 4-play, 98-yard drive. That was set up by the turnover on downs that we talked about, that goal line stand. This drive, Lagway had Badger for 58 yards. The third touchdown drive in the second quarter, that was set up by Devin Moore's interception return all the way to the goal line. So the complimentary football there. So there's your 21-point second quarter explosion. But then we go to the fourth quarter, Will. Florida's up by 14. The score is 34-20. And another 5-play, 59-yard touchdown drive. And this one is a 3rd and 8 pass to Badger, again for 40 yards. Love the aggressiveness there. That's what it is. I mean, 7 completions on 14 attempts for DJ Lagway. But that's what happens, Will. I mean, it was not many plays leading to touchdowns. It helps where you don't have to hit play after play after play. These little dink and dunks where, what Kentucky's been able to do for Florida in the past is just wait for Florida to mess up. This aids the offense so much where, you're not going to have to make those mistakes. You're within scoring distance in just a couple plays.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think this is always why I question the every 3 drives for Lagway, because typically a young guy, and you can see this in the tape when you looked at his high school play, is he was going to be aggressive going downfield. Like, they ran the flood concept type stuff, the 3 levels thing that Billy Napier was just talking about. They run those flood concepts all the time in high school. And when you watched it, he was aggressive and went downfield. When you watched him in spring practice, or in the spring game, he was aggressive and went downfield. And we've even seen it early in the year that sometimes he's even been a little bit over aggressive going downfield. But sometimes there's 2 things there. One is the aggressiveness is going to cause turnovers from time to time, just because when you try to be aggressive, sometimes you're going to miss. And the other aspect of it is that he was 7 for 14. But there were a bunch of drives. There was one drive specifically I remember where it was 3 and out. And it was 3 throws. And all 3 throws were incomplete. And you're sitting there going, wow, they didn't even try to run the ball. And I look at it now in hindsight and go, well, they shouldn't have tried to run the ball. They need to just let that guy chuck the ball over the yard. But if he overthrows 2 of those, this is a completely different game. And I think that's sort of the thing that Florida fans are going to have to at least, to bring you down a little bit from where you're at, is he's got to hit at a really high level on those deep throws in order for this offense to be successful, given some of the other limitations that he has. Now, I will say that the thing I was actually most impressed with in the game was on the opening drive. He took a sack. I think it was on second down.
Mm-hmm.
And he took the sack because everyone was covered. Kentucky fell into coverage and he didn't try to fit it in. He understood, I've already got 3 points. And he tried to scramble around. But I think people will look at that and go, oh, that's a young quarterback. Like he's taking the sack. I'm like, no, that's not a young quarterback. A young quarterback throws that ball up and all of a sudden it's going the other way, or you got a touchback or whatever. He didn't throw that one up. The interception, I think, was a misread of the defense because I think they adjusted post-snap. Those are things he's going to pick up looking on tape, and he'll be able to figure out moving forward. That's not he's not seeing the field because it's moving too fast pick. That's they changed something from the pre-snap alignment, and he didn't pick it up pick. And those are the types of things that I think you can fix relatively quickly. I still think that there's going to be a lot of inconsistency here. I think when you look at Lagway overall, so like if you look at his PFF ratings, Miami is 58, then 81 against Samford, 53 against A&M, 65 against Mississippi State, 69 against Central Florida, 49 against Tennessee, and 84 against Kentucky. That's a lot of up and down. And I think that's one of the things that we're going to see is a lot of up and down, mainly because the ups are extraordinary ups because he's hitting those deep throws, and the downs are going to be significant downs because the intermediate and short passing game is going to be limited with him in there, especially if he's struggling to hit things deep. But what I'll say is, look, Samford was 81.1, Kentucky was 84.4 on PFF. If you look at QB rating, he was up around like 250, I think, against Samford, 191 here. If you look at yards above replacement, he's like 8 against Samford. That's my stat. He's 7.1 against Kentucky. So, we came out of that Samford game saying DJ Lagway looked awesome, but it's Samford. And now I come out of this one going, DJ Lagway just put up Samford numbers against Kentucky. And Kentucky was the 9th rated defense overall in points per game allowed against FBS opponents. They were like 35th, 36th in terms of yards per play. They were much worse through the air than they were on the ground. And so, look, I think Lagway was perfect to be able to take advantage of some of the things that they do, that they don't do as well. But, against a real legitimate SEC defense, he just took him behind the woodshed and he made him look like Samford. Like every time they gave him a one-on-one matchup, he put the ball on him and he put it deep and he made him pay. And if you don't think that opened up the running game at some point along the way, you're crazy, right? I mean, one of the reasons they were able to run the way they were is because the safeties had to go, oh crap, and like turn around and watch behind them because the ball was going to come out flying. There were still a few throws, though, where I'm sitting there going, that one's going into coverage and those sorts of things.
The first drive was perfect. He had the deep pass to Trey. There was a throw in there mixed in, too, where it was like, oh, no, that's about to be picked off. Okay, he got away with one. And then you mentioned the sack, too. So, we learned a lot just in that first drive alone. And then, of course, learned more as the game went on.
But the other thing that I learned is he threw a pick, and then he came back out, and he wasn't afraid. Yeah. In fact, I think Billy Napier was more afraid of him than he was. Like Napier comes out after the pick and then sort of sits on the ball going into the second half. And I'm like, oh no, like they're only up by 2 touchdowns like this. And then Kentucky, sure enough, converts a 4th down, comes down the field, puts it in the end zone, only down by a touchdown. Lagway specifically, but the entire Florida team at that point could have puckered up.
Yeah,
like it could have been one.
I said that in the game review yesterday. There was a couple times. And that was one of them.
Yeah, and he didn't. He just said, "Screw it, I'm going to keep going downfield." And if nothing else, like that attitude and the way he sort of just chucks it in no matter what, like reminds me of Brett Favre.
Yeah, it's 2 weeks in a row because we talked about it last week with Tennessee. He throws the pick against Tennessee. Very next drive, he comes out RPO. He wants to throw it.
Yep. And so he's not going to be impacted by throwing an interception. He's not afraid to throw an interception. He's not afraid to go out there and let it rip. Now, there's going to be some times where coaches are going to have to pull him back a little bit and go, hey, you don't have to take the deep shot every time it's there if the intermediate route is running wide open. But look, when's the last time you saw him throw the short route on a flood? I can't remember seeing him throw the short route on a flood.
I put it in the game review yesterday. He had no passes behind or at the line of scrimmage. Not one.
Yeah, the shortest one was the one to Boardingham that didn't convert a third down. And he was like, screw that. I'm not throwing it in front of the sticks again.
I mean, we're going to see what we get with it. Now, of course, that's not going to be every game. But, yeah, I mean, for what this game provided us and what it showed, there was no over-reliance on the screens, no over-reliance on the pop pass. I mean, it was there. I mean, and look, that pop pass is a called read. Billy Napier didn't call it either.
Yeah, I'll tell you. So I've been pretty positive here, and I'm trying to be as positive as I can. How's this guy not been starting? I mean, look, I think it's one of those.
Like we've been down that road before.
Well, it's just one of those things where you look at it, you go, the guy's going to need 25 throws to be effective most weeks, right? Like if you're relying on those deep throws, giving him 3 throws a half is a disservice to him in many cases. It's also a disservice to Mertz from the standpoint of like, you're basically disrupting the entire rhythm to get, to get him in. Now it took the entire half against Tennessee for him to sort of get into that rhythm, but now he just had his first, so the 2 times he's actually gotten first team reps the entire week, he's come out and just completely demolished the defense. So now he gets 2 straight weeks of first team reps heading into this game against the Bulldogs. And oh my goodness, buddy. Like I thought about coming down for the cocktail party and was I
just got the email from Florida today. It's sad to say this, but there are tickets available.
Wow. So you're telling me I should come down for this one? That's I'll talk to my wife. I'm not sure that one's going to fly, but I mean, I thought about coming down, but I sort of looked at it and was like, oh no, man, like that one's like everybody's putting that one in the L column. Do I want to come down for that? And look, I think
that's a cocktail party. You got to experience anyway.
I get it, but look, I think everybody has been looking, and this was the disappointing part of the Miami game, is everyone's been looking for hope to latch on to. We all like Billy Napier, the person, except for when he gets up at a press conference after they've gotten beat by 30 and talks about anything. I mean, at that point, people are going to point vitriol at him. But I think most people like Billy Napier, the person. I think most people are really impressed that this team didn't fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I thought they were going to go up to Mississippi State, and I picked Florida to win, but I picked it to be close. And I thought it was entirely possible that the team would fall apart, like they did under Dan Mullen against South Carolina a few years ago, where it was just everything went wrong and they just sort of gave up and that was it. And so they haven't done that. And I think that's a testament to Billy Napier. I think it's a testament to the guys' characters in the locker room. However, we got this coming on the horizon, and I'll be honest, I'm still not convinced that they're going to be competitive in those games, but I have a heck of a lot more hope coming out of this one that they will be competitive in those games than I have at any point in the season. Like this is a real opponent. Like Kentucky lost to Georgia by a point. Kentucky beat Ole Miss. So this is something where you look at it, and I think the other thing is if you look at Alabama, you look at Georgia, you look at Texas, there's nobody in the SEC who's like truly, truly dominant right now. I think Georgia's probably the closest to it, though. So we're gonna get a good dose of reality, or we're gonna give out some reality, right? That if Lagway comes out there and plays like he did in this one, Florida's gonna have a chance. And I sort of look at it and go, if you'd have told me 3 weeks ago, does Florida have any chance to beat Georgia? I'd have been like 99.5 to 0.5, something like that. We're maybe like 85-15 right now. Like there's an opportunity here. And look, there's really an opportunity for Billy Napier, because we've been talking all year that the Miami game, the A&M game, the Utah game last year, the 5-game losing streak to end the year, that's a lot of withdrawals from the Bank of Florida fan base.
Yeah.
He needs to put some deposits in. So let's put some. So if he can, a win against Georgia is an enormous deposit in the fan base bank, and it puts you in a position where you're essentially bowl eligible, given what Florida State looks like right now. Yeah. And that's obviously progress from last year. So look, I'm never going to root against my team. I want Florida to do great. I want Florida to win, and the chips will fall where they may at the end of the year in terms of coaching decisions and athletic director decisions and all that sort of stuff. But, oh, man, would it be sweet to go in there and just rip the Bulldogs? That'd be awesome.
Absolutely. We'll get into that. We'll take a look at that, the rest of the schedule coming up, too, because it kind of just sets up where Florida is. But, Will, I mean, two guys really getting the benefit. And, look, we're getting their benefit as well. But them coming in, transfer wide receivers, Chimere, Dike, Elijhah Badger, huge difference makers at the wide receiver position. I don't know if anybody saw this today, but I went and shared it. Elijhah Badger leads the country in yards per catch with 23.8. One more time. Florida has a wide receiver right now that leads the country in yards per catch, Elijhah Badger. And, of course, getting the big benefit of some of those downfield shots from DJ Lagway. And, Will, him coming in, I was a big proponent of it. Loved once he put his name into the portal. Go get him, go get him, go get him. He was the type of receiver Florida needed, an outside threat, a downfield. Actually, he's more of a downfield threat than I even thought he would be. Everybody knows how high I was on him if you've chronicled Gators Breakdown here. Huge. I was thought more of a physical catch-run type of guy. He certainly has raised his game because you wouldn't have seen this coming because go back and look at his Arizona State numbers. That's why I shared those. Yards per catch, 2 years ago, 12.4. Last year, 11 yards. This year, 23.8. I mean, that's how much he's elevated his threat down the field here for the Gators. And, that's just in 7 games, 22 catches, 524 yards, but also making his presence felt on this Gator offense in the wide receiver room. Chimere Dike, well, I think has come to Florida and probably has made a name for himself to now go get drafted. He probably didn't have a draft profile, much of one coming into this year at Florida, but improved his game as well. I mean, 2 years ago with Graham Mertz, of course, at Wisconsin was his best season, 47 receptions, 689 yards, 14.7 average, and 6 touchdowns. Well, he's improved that this year. He's got 21 catches right now, 420 yards. He's improved his yards per up to 20. Last year he was at 17.3, but didn't play a whole lot. But in his best season, he had 14.7 yards a catch, 14.7 yards of reception. This year, 20. So about 6 yards, 5.5 yards more there for Chimere Dike. 2 touchdowns on so far this year. So, Will, I mean, it certainly shows when DJ Lagway's out there. But these guys were putting up some pretty good numbers playing with either quarterback. Of course, Badger, his 3-catch, 148-yard performance. It goes a long way here. One more time. Leads the country in yards per catch. Chimere Dike comes in at 19th in the country. There in that same stat, Will. He's 6th in the SEC with his 20 yards per catch. So you see it. This is something that Billy Napier offense likes to do. We saw it a couple years ago with AR and Justin Shorter. It is a part of this offense. I know a lot of people forgot that when Graham Mertz is out there and can't really push the ball down the field. But you go and look at it, Billy Napier, when he wants to call his plays for the best of their ability, he's going to take his shots down the field.
Yeah, I mean, so I think they're two different kinds of players, right? So
Yes,
and Dike has actually been a little bit more consistent this year. So in games where Mertz started, he averaged 11 yards per catch against Miami, 15.2 against A&M, 14.3 against Mississippi State, 22 against Central Florida, 19 against Tennessee. Against Samford, he only had 1 catch, but it was for 44 yards. And then he had 2 catches, averaged 33.5 yards against Kentucky. So clearly there was a DJ Lagway effect there. Not a big surprise, right? If you look at Badger, though, it's pretty striking. So against Miami, 3 catches, 14.3 yards. Against Samford, 3 catches, 41 yards per catch. Then A&M, 5 catches, 18.8 yards. Against Mississippi State, 3 catches, 15 yards. Against Central Florida, 3 catches, 13.7 yards. Against Tennessee, 2 catches, 15 yards per catch. And against Kentucky, 3 catches, 49.3 yards per catch. So he's averaged over 40 yards per catch in the 2 games where DJ Lagway has been the quarterback. And even DK has seen a significant bump in terms of that. And look, if you look at average depth of target for DJ Lagway, he's going downfield way, way, way more often than Graham Mertz is. They're just different quarterbacks. Yeah. And again, I think you can be successful with Graham Mertz at quarterback. I just think that the explosives come when you've got a guy like DJ Lagway, and given these receivers that you've got. And honestly, I think this is one of the things that may end up being interesting for this year is Trey Wilson is sort of the forgotten man in all of this because these guys are just getting bombs downfield. He's like a decoy underneath, and Lagway never gets to his second read because he's just like, that dude's open. I'm going to hit him 50 yards downfield. And, it's a really interesting place to be because Florida hasn't had a guy who's had the ability to do that probably since Felipe Franks. And even then, Franks wasn't a guy who pulled the trigger consistently to go downfield. He had the arm to do it, but he didn't just pull the trigger consistently. Lagway is constantly looking for the shot downfield, and it gets him in trouble sometimes. Sometimes he's dodging the defenders and he's dancing around back there, and all of a sudden you end up with a sack and you're in second and long, and then Napier runs on second and long, so it's third and long, and now you're trying to convert a 3rd and 12, and the defense is going to be playing more of a shell, and so it's harder to beat him deep. But
but shout out to the offensive line there too, though. I mean, a lot of these deep shots is because he's got time.
Well, I'll tell you, there was a play, I want to say it was against Central Florida, where Austin Barber did an awesome job and just pancake blocked the defensive end coming around. And Mertz took off and ran for maybe 7 or 8 yards in a first down. But there was a single high safety on that play, and Florida had sent double posts at the safety. And it was one of those things where I'm just like, oh my God, he's got to be salivating at that. You've got a safety who has to choose one of those two guys, and he's got to be wrong. Whoever he chooses, the other guy is in one-on-one coverage. And then somebody sent me a screenshot of the all-22, and it turns out the safety had fallen down the field. And so not only what could the safety not be right, but no matter who the ball got thrown to, it was going to be one-on-one coverage. And Mertz didn't let the ball go. He felt the guy go down on the ground behind him because Barber had the pancake block, and he just kind of shifted out and didn't make the throw downfield. And that throw gets made now. And Lagway is either willing to take the hit and take the sack, or he's just not as cerebral as Graham Mertz was in terms of quickly going through those progressions and checking from long to short. And that's not a knock at Lagway. It's just it's a mindset thing, really. It's one of those things where you go, he's looking long to short. It's very clear he's looking long to short. And he's never getting to the short guy. In fact, I think sometimes that's to his detriment. He threw a couple of those crossers to Dike where Dike had 2 or 3 guys on him and very easily could have gone in the other direction. But that's just the way it's the way he's wired. And that's why the ball ends up going deep to these guys, and they're making the play to their credit. The play that Badger made when he had the one-on-one on the outside and Lagway just sort of threw the out. I mean, that was a hell of a catch by Badger on that particular play. So the wide receivers are starting to gain confidence that they can make those plays. Lagway is giving them confidence that if they really do run those routes hard, that the ball's going to be coming their direction. And
I'm going to Napier there too. Look, I know the guy has gotten shunned as a play caller or whatever, and being conservative at times. But that one I talked about, Badger, that the last was explosive. It's 3rd and 8. Florida's got a 14-point lead. I bet everybody's guessing run play there, and there's a shot down the field.
Yeah, I'll be interested to go back and look. I didn't actually look on the rewatch as to whether Lagway checked out or whatever he had.
Yeah, true.
So does he check out to that? Does he have the freedom to throw that out route? What happened before the snap is something that we probably need to think of. That's in terms of his development. I suspect he's probably not checking out to that play at this point yet. I don't think they've probably given him that freedom.
Well, and that goes to it too. Even if they did, it's still allowing your true freshman quarterback to make that decision in that moment in time. Up 14, 3rd and 8. You don't probably need to do that, but I mean, look, we all like to see it because we've been shunning for us too much, conservative play calling, too much conservative play. Didn't happen in this. I mean, I think the drive before it was 3rd and 2, and they allowed Lagway through a pass. I think that would feel incomplete, but still.
Well, and again, every pass play that they have is going to have levels.
Yeah.
It's a question of what is the quarterback trying to achieve within the framework of the offensive play call. And what it looks like is Lagway's willing to dance around back there to take the shot, whether it's 3rd and 8, 3rd and 12, 3rd and 2, 3rd and 6. Like, he didn't care. Like, he's sitting there going, if they gave me the coverage and I think that guy's going to come open, I'm going to wait and wait and wait and throw that thing out there. Now, it's interesting. On the second drive, he actually had Dike open, and he didn't stop to get his feet set. and he sort of hopped as he threw it, and he overthrew Dike. And I was like, oh, like he's a little bit inaccurate because he didn't quite get his footwork correct and that sort of thing. So that's, in many ways, I'm impressed from the standpoint of, if I go back and look at the 7 of 14, he ends up 7 of 14 for 259 yards. Slight adjustments, he ends up 10 for 14 for 340 yards. Like, I mean, it's not like he was missing the dinks and dunks and then he hit the balls downfield. This isn't one of those things where he gave a little shovel pass to Trey Wilson, who takes it 85 yards, and we tack that on to the end and he gets credit for that. He earned every single one of these deep throws. And if you're hitting 50% of your throws and your average depth of target's like 15 yards downfield, you're going to be successful at times. That'll be the question, though, moving forward, is other teams now have tape. And teams who maybe dismissed the Samford game and dismissed some of the things that he can do throwing deep are going to say, okay, well, those are the things we have to take away. So I would expect to see a lot of quarters coverage. I would expect to see a lot of, too high safeties where you're essentially daring Florida to run the ball. I would expect a lot of I would expect a lot of cover 2 zone under, where you're making him fit the ball into tight spots, read where it needs to go, hitting a guy like Boardingham or Hansen on one of those little curls where they have to turn around in between a linebacker and a safety, or in between 2 linebackers. There was a play, it was like 3rd and 4, I think, where he had Badger on a little out route and it was open and he pulled it down. Now, I'd rather him not throw it if he thinks there's a risk of a pick 6. And if he'd left it behind Badger, it could have been a pick 6. But that's a throw you got to make. Yeah. In the SEC, that was the play call. The play call was they wanted the out. The play call was get it to him in stride, and he's going to be there. He's going to be able to run to the sticks and get the first down. Those sorts of things. The critical 3rd down. So, like, if Florida's up by 4 points late in the 4th quarter against Georgia, and you need a conversion on a 3rd and 5, do you really want him throwing a 37-yard pass down the sideline in one-on-one coverage against Georgia's corner? Right. Now, that might be the best option right now, right? I mean, the best option might be they're giving you one-on-one. Like, that's where it needs to go. But I don't know if that's necessarily where you want to go in that situation. And so there are still some places where a guy like Graham Mertz is probably the better option in certain circumstances. But, man, after watching that game against Kentucky, dreaming about what can be as DJ Lagway builds his way into learning all the intricacies of the position, given the skill set that we've seen and the ability to hit that deep ball, it's like, oh my goodness, like, just the sky is the limit for the guy. And it's so exciting to see it translate. I mean, we've been waiting for two and a half years. I mean, the guy's been recruited at Florida, it seems like, since Billy Napier came here. And we've always sort of said, like, this is going to be the thing that either makes or breaks Napier. And to see Lagway out here performing like a 5, I mean, is there any, like, would you take Nico at Tennessee over Lagway? No, not a chance.
Nope.
Like, honestly, it minus the coaching turmoil, is there any quarterback that you would take over Lagway right now?
You mean say build with him and I got him for the next 2 years after this too?
In the country, like, you got to Dylan Gabriel, like, like who Carson Beck, like, who are you? I mean,
we've just seen all the big quarterbacks this year not live up to the billing. I mean, Shedeur Sanders is probably the only one, but I'm not taking him at this time. Give me my 3 years with DJ Lagway to this point. Beck hasn't lived up to it. Ewers hasn't lived up to it. Jalen Milroe just coming off his worst game since he's come onto the scene there. So, yeah, I mean, you're telling me I get this quarterback that I've seen start against Samford, start against Kentucky, and sprinkle it in here or there, and what I just saw, and tell me, okay, I get to work with that for 2 more years after this? Yeah, give me him.
Put it this way. After this game, Will be putting a bet on DJ Lagway winning the Heisman Trophy next year. Like, I'm just like, whatever. The odds are going to be something that'll
coaching change or not.
I don't care. Okay. I think so. Here's what I see. What I see is a guy who's making the correct first read off of the pre-snap alignment. And I see a guy who struggles when the defense makes an adjustment after the snap. He will fix that. He's a smart guy. He knows what he's supposed to do in these cases, and I think he's going to be able to fix it. I think he panics sometimes when the pressure comes because he doesn't want to take the sack. but there is an aggressiveness in terms of knowing where he wants to go. And my favorite pass in the entire game was the second explosive after Kentucky comes down to make it a 27-20 game. He hits Dike coming across. And then the next pass, he hits Dike again. And he actually had one-on-one on the deep route. He could have taken that shot. And instead, he sees Dike wide open and ends up hitting him. And I'll say this, the reason I harp on completion percentage at the high school level is because it indicates that you're finding the guy who's open. Because with the wide hashes and with the limited practice time that you get at both the high school and college level to implement schemes, there's always going to be a guy open. And so if you see a quarterback out there who's throwing to guys who are just open all the time, that's a guy who's been able to read the defense and understand who's going to come open where, given the scheme and given the defense that's being played against him. So that was actually my favorite play out of all. I don't think it was an explosive play. It was fun to watch. But I looked at it and I go, he had an opportunity to take a deeper shot. But he actually recognized what was going to open for him, finds the guy wide open, and all of a sudden Dike's taking it down to the 3 or 4 yard line and setting them up for a touchdown. And the other aspect of this that I think is kind of interesting is Lagway doesn't seem to have any ego. Because can you imagine hitting all of these massive shots and then just going, all right, we're at the 3 yard line, hand it to Jaden Bond, let him have 5 touchdowns. Like every time they got down there, he's like, all right, Ball, you do the job, man.
Yeah.
Like you would figure they'd run some sort of read option and let Lagway pull it and try to get in the end zone or something. They were just like, nah, Lag's got us to where we needed to go. Now we're just going to hand it off the ball.
I think once Ball gets to like 3 and you're still in like very good down in distance, it's like, okay, let's see if we can set some kind of record here. So let's just keep going with it now. Good for Jaden Ball though too. You know, in Florida's the kind of questions when Montreal Johnson goes down, you're only really playing with 2 running backs, and one good sets a record in his first start. So we've talked about some good there. Good stuff on the offensive side of the ball. You know, we'll see probably one of, if not the best defense they'll play all year long coming up in 2 weeks in Jacksonville. So we just saw what Georgia's defense was able to kind of quote unquote come alive, because maybe not your typical Georgia defense that you've seen the last few years, but just go to Austin and eat Quinn Ewers alive there. So plays his worst game of the year. Hopefully not the Georgia defense figuring out things as they go to Austin, get a bye week, and then Florida. So we'll see what holds there. So let's go to the other side of the ball. Defense played well in their last 3 games since the bye week. Looks like they've certainly figured some things out. Let's hear from Billy Napier.
Continues to be a pretty good month for the defense. What's continued to evolve, you think, on that side of the ball? And is there even a chance for another gear with another open week?
Yeah, I think we got good kids, man. I mean, that's at the root of all this. I mean, I could talk about the technical part, but it comes down to a selfless group that was solution-oriented, didn't point a finger. Obviously very disappointed with how we played early in the year. The staff took ownership. We had really good leadership at the player level. There was collaboration there, and I think in the open date we said, hey, put the ball down, let's call it, and we got to work on our between-play process, and then we just played better fundamental football. We played harder. And I think the players took ownership of that. And again, it goes back to what I said in here after game 1. They were embarrassed. We were embarrassed. So we had a decision to make. And I think, obviously, just really proud of the players. I mean, at the core, they want to do it the right way.
So here we are, Will. Before UCF, that was the bye week. The bye week comes, and then we get the last 3 games. Before UCF, Florida was giving up 425.5 yards a game. Currently, down to 370, basically 371 yards. Only giving up 273 to UCF, 312 to Tennessee, 309 to Kentucky. 425 going into those 3 games. And one more time, only giving up 273 to UCF, 312 to Tennessee, 309 to Kentucky. Before UCF, Florida was giving up 189 yards a game on the ground, 164. Currently, giving up 108 to UCF, 143 to Tennessee, 144 to Kentucky, then passing improvement there as well. Before UCF, giving up about 237 yards passing. That was good for 97th in the country, all the way up to 47th now. 206 yards passing the game. The Gators currently are giving up 165 to UCF, 169 to Tennessee, 165 to Kentucky. Well, we know these offenses Florida's defense face, very one-dimensional, known for their running attacks, known for their rushing attacks, not passing the ball all too well. We continue to see that from these teams week in and week out. But certainly, I mean, you look at the rushing numbers and look the improvement there too. These were really good rushing offenses. Florida shut them down, able to make them one-dimensional. And you knew they were limited in passing the ball, so they weren't going to take advantage of you there. Unfortunately, still come out on the short end of the Tennessee game, but we're in that because of the improvements that you made in the rush defense, not letting them go crazy there with Dylan Sampson and getting his yards. So certainly a big improvement. Yes, opponent plays into it a lot, but even before this, it didn't matter who Florida was playing. Mississippi State was right before the bye week. They couldn't run the ball on anybody. Runs all over this Florida defense. And we've just seen it time in and time out, dating back to since Billy Napier's been here. It's been bad defense. Bad offenses have been able to take advantage of the bad Florida defense. Well, the defense looked bad at the bye week. They have fixed some things. Players demanded it. They wanted some accountability. They wanted more like a game-like situation in practice. They wanted to be held accountable for physicality. Wanted to be held accountable for bad play. Wanted to keep score. And certainly, we'll see what it means. They are certainly better on that side of the ball. The last 3 games show it. I don't know what the future holds for that side of the ball, but they are certainly have been fun to watch these last 3 games.
Yeah, it's interesting when you think about how they've done it. So, Sports Info Solutions breaks down team tendencies. They've played with a light box 71% of the time. So when you start looking at those rushing statistics where you go, oh, look where they were and look where they are, they haven't changed fundamentally what they're doing on defense. They were right around 70 or 71% after the first 3 games or 4 games of the season as well. They haven't changed what they're doing. What they have done is they've just started to win some battles. So you look at 1 high shell versus 2 high shell, 27% in 1 high shell, 64% in 2 high shell. They're playing a ton of 3-3-5. So that's been 54% of what they're doing is out of the 3-3-5. That's a little bit of a difference from what they did last year. They're only blitzing 26% of the time. And in fact, when they're blitzing, they're getting burned. So there's a 48% success rate against the blitz. But when they have a 4-man rush, which is 58% of the time, a 40% success rate. When they have a 3-man rush, that's only 16% of the time. They're getting a 32% success rate. So all of those things, a lot of different percentages I'm throwing around there, suggest that Florida is being conservative on defense. They are protecting the back end. They are making sure they don't give up anything huge, but they're winning some battles up front. So they're not being forced to bring that second safety down to support against the run. They're not being forced to do things outside of what they want to do. And I would say against Miami, against Texas A&M, they weren't able to do that. They had to bring safeties down into the box to try to help because they weren't able to fill the gaps. They weren't able to stop the run. They were getting dominated up front. Even like, a play where they sort of clogged things up and the running back got stopped at like 2 yards, the whole pile would still get driven 3 or 4 yards. And you were looking at like a 2nd and 4 after all that stuff. And consequently, what it meant was Cam Ward looked like a Heisman candidate, and the Texas A&M quarterback looked otherworldly, even though he's since lost his job again to Connor Wegman. And so I don't think they've actually fundamentally shifted anything. This is certainly a Ron Roberts profile more than it is an Austin Armstrong profile. But what has changed is there are guys who are winning battles. Jack Clyburn is winning one-on-one battles. Aaron Gates is winning one-on-one battles. Triquez Bridges is winning one-on-one battles. Des Watson is winning one-on-one battles. Like, you just start looking around.
They just played better. Like we went into that bye week. Remember, we were asking, we talked amongst ourselves of who should play more. And a lot of the names that we are saying who should have played more in that bye week are now getting a lot more playing time and playing well.
Well, and look, I mean, I think you got to be a little bit careful because it's always it's always like for years we'd sit there and go, just put somebody else in. It can't be worse. And it turns out that's not necessarily true, and things could have gotten worse. But I think now you're seeing the guys that they brought in either through the portal or guys they brought in through recruiting really start to make a difference. The thing that jumps out to me is the 3-3-5, that they're having success with a 3-3-5 alignment. And the idea that you could have Chimere, James, Pup Howard, and Jaden Robinson all on the field at the same time and have all of those guys excelling and really in many ways supporting that light box, right? Where you've got the 6 guys in the box, but the linebackers are physical enough to hold up, but quick enough to get in the backfield and get some tackles for loss, and quick enough that if you do decide to blitz or bring a simulated pressure or something like that, that the defensive lineman or the offensive lineman is not necessarily going to be able to recover and protect his quarterback. There's been a lot of quarterbacks sort of shuffling around to try to deal with that. Now, if we're going to talk positive, we also got to talk about, that Nico and KJ Jefferson and Brock Vandegrift are not the guys coming up on the schedule. And we can talk about Beck struggling. We can talk about Ewers struggling. We can talk even about Jackson Dart struggling.
It's all relative.
It's very relative there, right? And we do need to keep that in mind. So look, Florida's defense could barely stop Samford in the second game of the year. So given where they were to where they've come now is really, really impressive. But obviously you got to keep it up because otherwise it doesn't mean anything. Like it's not good enough to be good for 3 games. In the SEC, you got to be good for all 8 or 9. And that's coming up on the schedule.
Back to start playing some balanced offenses. Like I see, those offenses that they just played known much more for running the ball, limited in their passing attack. About to play some offenses that can balance you out just a bit. So that is going to be more of a true test. Are they better? Sure. How much better? We're going to get our answer. And look, that's team wide, but I do think it starts with that defense because that's just a side of the ball that we've pinpointed. Has cost this team a lot, cost this program a lot the last few years.
So one thing I will say is that I would say in years past, after they gave up that flea flicker, that things would have gone south really quickly.
Yeah,
and it didn't. They basically said, "All right, we made a mistake, forgot it." Came back out there and stuffed them.
Yeah.
The only other touchdown that got scored on the defense the entire time was the drive to start the opening half or the second half, and after that they shut them down. Now, I mean,
that was about the only drive Kentucky even had any success on third down.
Yeah, there was a little bit more bend in the second half. Kentucky decided they were going to lean on them, and it was 4-down territory the whole time too, which meant that you had to hold up. You get a stop on 3rd and 1, you're still going to have to get the stop on 4th and 1 as well. So there was a little bit of that going on, and Florida struggled to get off the field a little bit there in the second half. That's one of the reasons why Lagway only had 3 throws, beyond the fact that it was time to sort of run the clock. But even that, I mean, it was something where it's like, I mean, if you're up by a couple of touchdowns, play really conservative, let the offense go down the field 3, 4, 5 yards at a time. Not really a problem because 5 minutes later, okay, they pulled it to 17. Woo! Yeah. Like it doesn't really make a difference. So I think some of that was by design and intentional, but I think some of it was Florida starting to get gassed too, and that is something we'll have to watch. That is, they're playing better offenses, more balanced offenses. The being able to get off the field, I think, is sort of it's not just that they get off the field and turn the ball back over to the offense. It's that they're not constantly on the field for 12, 14, 16 plays and just gassed by the time the end of the game comes around. So I think in many cases, you can even see that in the Miami game. They bent but didn't break the first couple of drives, and then they were just completely gassed. And Florida's offense wasn't doing anything, so they were right back out on the field. And eventually the dam broke, and that's sort of when the game got out of control.
Yeah, that time of possession, let's see. Yeah, that first drive, almost 6.5 minutes for Kentucky. And then it was 12 plays, 75 yards. And then the turnover on downs, their next drive, 15 plays, 53 yards, 7:52. So, yeah. There we go. Yeah, just fun to see. You have a defense that you have some confidence in that is going out there and getting it done. So, So, I mean, we've already talked about it. Just a reminder, this is what's coming up there for Florida, of course. A 6-1 Georgia team, a 6-1 Texas team, a 6-1 LSU team, all 3 of those teams in the top 10. Ole Miss at 18, so your next 4 opponents, all in the top 20. And then we can laugh 1-6 Florida State there at the very end of the season. So certainly the November that was talked about ad nauseum, all off season, all preseason, about to come to fruition as Georgia is up next, then Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, and Florida State. So, well, we'll see what it means. This is that part of the schedule. Look, the wins that just happened for Florida, were some of those wins that we were pointing to before the season. Those were the ones that you had to take advantage of. Now, it's that part that comes up that a lot of people are looking forward is going to make or break the Gator season. Maybe make or break Billy Napier. We'll see what it all means in the end. But that November everybody talked about coming up next.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's funny because we sort of looked and we're like, one of those teams is going to take a step back. They really haven't.
Ole Miss probably, I guess.
I mean, I guess, but I mean, the only terrible loss in there is Ole Miss losing to Kentucky.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, from that standpoint, LSU's loss to USC is excusable. Texas's loss to Georgia is excusable. Georgia's loss to Alabama is excusable. So, I look through there and I go, there's not a whole lot of fat to trim on this 4. I mean, if you'd have told me that the combined record of these teams was going to be 23-5, I would have been like, all right, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
and I think the biggest one now, if you'd have told me it was going to be 24-11, I would have said, wow, a bunch of stuff really went wrong.
You thought it would have been split up. Yeah, you thought it would have been split. It would have been
LSU came back to the pack. How about that? And it turns out that Georgia just completely broke Florida State. I don't know what Kirby did to them, but he absolutely destroyed them in that bowl game last year. Because man, and if nothing else, got them to ostracize the entire ACC. And then come out and put up this stinker. It's just been, I mean, for as bad as Florida's been at times, man, can you imagine if Florida was losing like Duke and Boston College and Georgia Tech and all those teams? That's just hideous. So, hey, but at least they got like 10 years and $100 million that Mike Norvell left. So that'll be fun.
Good luck with that.
Oh boy.
A little bit of recruiting news. This is the first time I've talked recruiting since the season has started. A lot of that is just by the nature of everything going on, of course. But 4-star defensive lineman Joseph Mbachu decommits from the Gators, 425th player overall in 24/7 Sports Composite. Thought to be this kind of hidden gem in the class. 6'4.5", 275-pounder mentioned. This is why hidden gem, because he's still considering Florida. The other schools in the mix: Alabama, Auburn, Michigan, Tennessee, Texas, and USC. That makes up his group of top schools going forward there. So, look, pair that with the decommitment of wide receiver Joshua Moore in his flip to Miami, and the recruiting class has fallen all the way down to being ranked 51st on the 24/7 Sports Composite with 11 commits. With the way the season has gone so far and all the hot seat talk, no surprise to see decommitments, lack of commitments for a class that wasn't it was going to be kind of head this way. With the way the season was going into the season, it wasn't in a great spot to begin with. So this class was always going to be an uphill climb. And the reason I bring it up, are not those points, though. Of course, after the Kentucky win, there's still a lot of talk of what it would take for Billy Napier to save his job, and some out there being satisfied, of 6-6, 7-5 record because what the rest of the season holds. We just went over that. I can't really get on board with that in the first place, but it also just, for me, it can decide to keep Billy Napier at 6-6, 7-5 record. That's what it ends up being. To me, completely overlooks the direction of recruiting and the fits of what's going on there. And I've heard, that if recruits know Napier's going to be here, then the class will improve. Improve to what? I mean, if you're keeping him at 6-6, 7-5, is that really turning heads? Does that really mean stability for a recruiting class? Look, that recruiting class is not going to be anywhere near where it needs to be. The hole's dug too deep there. Bringing up recruiting isn't to complain where it is or the lack of movement. It's to bring up that it also needs to be factored into the equation when making a decision on Billy Napier's future. I know there's some good feelings from the team's recent performances, but this part of it should not be overlooked.
No, so I think there's a couple of things. When you talk about them being 50th or 51st in the 24/7 rankings, that is a point total. That is not an average player rating.
Right.
And so that is an important distinction to make because of what you said. They only have 11 commits. And so this class will end up in the 10 to 15 range if Napier stays and there's a certainty and they bring in 25 guys who are all rated kind of similarly to the guys they have in the class thus far, because their average player rating is 90.44. So Boston College is the next team on the list in the 24/7. Their average player rating is 86.2. So Florida is head and shoulders better than Boston College on a per player basis, and all they need to pass Boston College is more players. And those guys are out there. There's not as many as there have been before, but those guys are out there. And again, but I mean, look,
it's going to raise by default because of, like you said, adding guys. It's still not going to be anywhere near where we want it to be.
Well, and here's the thing. I said Florida was at 90.4. Florida State's at 91.4 with 12 commits, ranked 33rd in the country. So to be behind Florida State when that dumpster fire of a season is going on over there does indicate that there's a fundamental issue going on. I think,
but I thought all recruits had to know was that the head coach was going to be there the next year.
Well, and actually, it's funny because Bud Davis, our friend at J Bud Davis over there on X, he had some really interesting and thought-provoking stuff right after I think the A&M game, where he was sort of talking about the paths that Florida can take. And there are paths that involve Billy Napier and paths that don't involve Billy Napier. But his point was that if you don't think Billy Napier is the fundamental problem in recruiting, you're kind of better off fixing all those things that are fundamentally problems than you are just circling through coaches. Now, I don't know that I necessarily believe that. I have my own opinions on the matter. However, I think it does come back to how do you want to approach the problem and what is the problem. And the reality, though, is that Billy Napier has brought in basically Dan Mullen recruiting classes, maybe slightly better for the 3 years that he's been at Florida thus far. He hasn't hit any of the metrics that are necessary in order to win big in the SEC, while other coaches are screaming past him in terms of their recruiting. And a guy like Hugh Freeze, who really isn't having much success in year two, is out recruiting a bunch of folks in the SEC, and eventually those guys are going to hit there at places like Auburn. LSU still recruiting very well, but now you got Oregon up there pulling a huge chunk of 5 stars out of there under Dan Lanning. You're going to have, you're always going to have the Ohio States of the world. Maybe Alabama comes back to the pack a little bit, but Alabama's still a major brand. I mean, kids remember them being good, because they were good 2 years ago. So it's still a challenge to recruit at Florida. It's a challenge to recruit in the SEC right now. I think the problem to me isn't this year's recruiting class. The problem is that this year's recruiting class is very similar to all of the other recruiting classes. And so it's not something where I'm looking at it saying, oh, everything was on an upward trend until we started to get hot seat talk. It was never on an upward trend to begin with.
Right.
And so if it was never on an upward trend to begin with, that's one of the reasons why you start losing hope. Now, look, I mean, Clemson did not have this giant upward trend in recruiting when they started dominating the ACC. Now, our old buddy Bill Sykes would point out, and I think he's right, that you only had to that there's a big difference between being 10th or 12th in the country in recruiting and being the second best recruiting team in your conference, and being 10th or 12th in recruiting and being the 8th best team in your conference when it comes to overall recruiting. And all of that is true. And that makes this even more important in the SEC. But I think you got to take all those things into account. Is what is the path of the recruiting? What is the mechanism behind it that's sort of maybe causing some limitations? Is that limitation Napier related? Is it administration related? And look, I mean, the people who sign the checks and pay the bills are going to have to make those determinations. And, I think in many ways we all have our opinions on the matter, but we're not going to be proven right or wrong until either a change is made or a change isn't made, and we sort of see what happens from there.
Well, I've also been told, we'll just hit the transfer portal. I mean, you mean the same portal we're clowning FSU for?
Yeah, I was gonna say that does not seem like an effective way of building a team.
Exactly.
Like long term,
when you're going into year 4, no. Same. That's pretty much the same reason they're 1-6. Yeah, that portal? No, I don't think so. So can't have it both ways with that argument. But we'll see how it all shakes out. But recruiting is looking to the future, not looking great. Needs to be it needs to be factored in if we get to that point when determining if Billy Napier needs to be here after the season or not. And look, even with some miracle turnaround to the season that ensures Napier's return, the hole's already so deep. Class finish won't be good enough to where it needs to be. Then it certainly needs to be factored into the decision, I think, if you're in that 6-7 win thought process of what to do. So, we won't overlook it. Will. Geez, I called you Will first, then Bill, and come back to Will. So that's what happens when you bring up Bill Sykes. And then I was reading a comment in here too, but Billy's name comes up. So, I forgot where I was going to go now. But the hope. You bring up the word hope a bit, and if you're at 6-7 and 6-7 wins, and you're determining what to do with Billy Napier, and you have a recruiting class that's 20th. Where's the hope in that?
Well, look, nothing's changed. Like the only hope for Billy Napier to survive the SEC gauntlet after his last 3 recruiting classes was that DJ Lagway was a transformative quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing has changed in that entire analysis. And the 2025 class isn't going to change that analysis either. Unfortunately, what that means is that Lagway is going to be a guy who's going to have to drag them to prominence and then sort of build to that next step. And look, there's a possibility that could happen. If Lagway comes out and they put up 45 on Georgia, I think people are going to take a second look at Florida, right? And you sit there and go, I'm a 5-star recruit who's a wide receiver or a tight end. Maybe that's a place I'd like to go. So, and it's amazing. 3-4 weeks ago, we're sitting here basically on here like pallbearers, like ready to bury Billy Napier. And now we're talking about, is there hope for him to be able to survive? Well, the reason we haven't talked about recruiting is it was just like, are we even going to be able to get through the season?
Yeah.
And there's a possibility. I don't think it's a huge possibility, but there's a possibility that Lagway goes out and absolutely shows that against Georgia. And if Lagway goes for 350 yards, and even if Florida loses, but if Lagway goes out there for 350 yards and Florida looks competitive and Kirby's sweating there on the sideline, he goes, "Woo, I want to play that kid again." And, as long as they don't lose on a 12-man on the field while they're trying to kick the game-winning field goal, I think that those sorts of things are the deposits that you need. And recruiting is part of that. It's holistically, it's everything. Like the Jaden Rashada stuff is a withdrawal. The "Are you entertained" press conference when it's completely tone deaf is a withdrawal. It
just being not where it needs to be at the level to compete. There've been some good players. Don't count. That's not what I'm saying at all. It's just when Billy Napier was hired, you'd be lying.
Acquisition business.
You'd be lying if you thought these were the high school recruiting classes that we were signing up for.
Well, he understood that, right? He came in and said, this is a talent acquisition business. And so it's a talent acquisition business. He's right. Like his analysis of the way things work in college football is absolutely correct. His ability to deliver on that reality has been underwhelming so far. And, I've been writing for 2 years now that it's Lagway or bust. And it's unfair to the kid. And, it seems like he's mature enough to be able to take that on his shoulders. And the guy, if he stays at Florida, I think based on what I've seen so far, is going to come really close to having a statue out there. Like that's the kind of ability that you can see when you watch him play. And I just hope that statue isn't in Ohio State. that statue isn't in Auburn or wherever, because I think if he ends up someplace else, he's going to terrorize Florida fans. And we're going to look at that and go, how do we let that get away? And that's been the argument for Napier the entire time, right? It's been, you can't, if those two are inseparable, it's worth seeing where it goes. And I think that's where I'm at, is I'm sitting here going, all right, like it wasn't the way I would have wanted, and it's not the way that I would have designed Florida getting to the Lagway experiment. But DJ's now got a bunch of snaps under his belt. He's thrown for over 1,000 yards. He's put up 2 very good performances against Samford and Kentucky.
And in the last 2 weeks of winning against good defenses, a second half against Tennessee and a whole game versus Kentucky.
So unlike Anthony Richardson in 2021, he's actually prepared as best you probably could, other than just starting him the whole year. He's probably about as well prepared as you could be for this opportunity and this gauntlet. And if DJ Lagway goes out there and drags Florida to a 2-2 or 3-1 record in those 4 games, and then demolishes Florida State in the finale in Doak Campbell, and you go out there and you run them off the field,
Sign me up.
I mean, at that point, what do you do? Because I get it. There are shortcomings on the recruiting side. We all see it. But if you've got a transformative quarterback, it is really freaking fun to watch that guy play. And I don't know that you want to do anything to upset that apple cart. At that point, you kind of probably see where it goes and just kind of hope at that point. And you talked about hope. I mean, if Lagway comes out and pulls off a win over Georgia, like the amount of hope that Florida fans will have for the future just is like the growth will be exponential at that point.
Yeah, and it's going to have to continue.
I don't know, man. If he goes out and lights up Georgia, he can probably come out and lay a complete egg against Texas, and I'd be okay with it.
Well, I was about to say you can't go lose the next 3. So
that's probably certainly can't lose the next 4.
Yeah, right. That's where I was going with that. Yeah, I mean, if you told me right now, you give me that win over Georgia and we go lay an egg in Austin, where do I sign? I mean,
seriously, right?
I'll sign it right now.
Well, and if you told us before the season they go 1-1 in that 2-game stretch, sign me up now,
Yeah.
right? So honestly, the problem in all of this is that friggin' Tennessee game.
Yeah.
Where it's like if they'd have just been able to pull that one out, how much different does it feel being 5-2, where you kind of feel like you got away with one against Tennessee, but you've now competed against SEC opponents, and Tennessee would be, 16th, 17th, 18th in the country maybe at this point after the win last week. It's a very different feeling if that game goes Florida's way. Like if they go for the 2-point conversion and they end up getting it, and they pull off the win in Knoxville, man, like that just completely changes the way we feel about things.
Yeah.
And it turns out that is the criticism on the recruiting side to me, is that when you recruit at the level that Billy Napier has, you're on a razor's edge every week, and the 12 men on the field doesn't matter. We're talking about this game against Kentucky, and it was a dominating win by Florida, but they did give up a kickoff return for a touchdown. So it's not like it was perfect. There were things there that certainly against better teams are going to come back and bite them.
Nick Newton in his middle 8.
Yeah, that didn't go great. But here's what I'll say, Dave. Last week I would have laughed at you if you just said, we got a chance against Georgia, maybe, right? I would have just laughed and said, all right, are you drunk? Like, what's going on? And now I'm saying it. I'm going,
It is funny. Here's the funny thing about it. It is coming off the same week Georgia goes into Austin to beat Texas.
Well, look, I said we're from 99.5% chance to lose to 85. So, optimistic Will has his limits. But
no, you do feel better. Yeah, you do feel better about it for sure.
Well, and again, if he goes out and lays an egg, I think we have our answer, right, to all of these existential questions we're asking. If he goes out and lights it up, it actually makes it much more complicated. If he goes out and wins the game, then it becomes really complicated in terms of what you want to do and where you want to go and all those sorts of things. And but it becomes the exact story we've been preparing for now for 2 or 3 years, where you're just sitting there going, given what we're seeing on the field, given what we're seeing with recruiting, it's Lagway or bust. Yeah. And man, right now he's been boom. Like every time they've given him enough throws to produce explosives, he's doing it. I mapped it out earlier today just because I was curious. And the number of explosives that he has 20 explosives in 87 throws. I just go, holy moly, like that is a ton. Now he had 7 against Kentucky and he had 9 against Samford. So, obviously 16 of the 20
Mhm.
come in those two games, but those are also the games where he threw the ball. He threw the ball 25 times against Stanford. He threw the ball 14 times against Kentucky. And even in the Tennessee game where he threw the ball 17 times, he had 2 explosives in that one and ends up being responsible. They turned the ball over on downs once, which wasn't his fault when they were in the red zone, and then he leads them on the touchdown drive. Now, granted, big assist from Dike on the kick return, but Lagway sort of seems to have that right?
Yeah.
And we'll see where we go from there.
All right, there we go. Yeah, so we just figured out. That's the reason I wanted to bring up recruiting. It's not. I see it in there from Jonathan. Can't recruit while most want you fired. It's not the point I'm making. It's all the good feelings now that are coming because of win over Kentucky and some good recent performances. The 6-6, 7-5 record, and that being overlooked. That's why I bring it up. That's a.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's a fair criticism to make, to look at it and say, wins are necessary in order to get yozourself off the hot seat at Florida. I mean, Urban Meyer in the Swamp Kings documentary said, "I went 9-3, and I thought they were going to run me out of town." And look, Ron Zook was better than Napier in all 3 years. And Ron Zook had a 5-star quarterback where it was like, he doesn't fit Urban Meyer's offense. What are we going to is he going to transfer someplace else and blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. And I mean, I wrote something earlier this year. It was titled "The Forgotten Swamp King," and it was about Leak's contribution to that 2006 championship team. And the reality is that Chris Leak was a huge part of that win in 2006. And, they made a change anyway. Now, look, the dynamic of college football has changed quite a bit. The realities associated with why guys commit and why guys stay and how easy it is for them to move and all that sort of stuff has certainly changed. But if I'm looking at wins, if I'm looking at recruiting, if I'm looking at, 5-star recruits at quarterback, if I'm looking at all that stuff, Ron Zook was a better coach than Billy Napier thus far. And, there was some weird stuff that happened with Zook as well. Certainly Napier hasn't gotten into a fight with the fraternity, so that certainly helps. But there hasn't been a lot to latch on to, which is why you and I are talking about hope after win over Kentucky, rather than just coming in here going, Kentucky, check. And in year 3, that's what we feel like we should be doing, right? I feel like we should be coming in here going, Kentucky, check, got that win. What's next? Hey, look, we're 5-1, or we're 6-1, and we're ranked 14th in the country heading into this game against Georgia. Like, that is the expectation of Florida fans, and that has not been the expectation we've seen fulfilled so far. So, yeah, you end up on the hot seat when that sort of stuff happens. You know that when you take the job coming in. And recruiting through that noise, recruiting through that passion of the fan base is all part of it. It's part of the job. And, I'm not going to apologize for the fact that, that I was critical after that Miami game to open the season. No. That game was abysmal.
Yep.
And Napier deserved to be criticized for it and deserved to have a lot of vitriol sent his way. If he doesn't want it sent his way, be more prepared for that game to start the season, or fight through it now with the quarterback he got in there. So, we'll see.
All right. There we go. Good stuff there, Will. Good. Glad we were able to dive into the explosiveness of this offense. Hopefully defense keeps it up as well right there. So you said you got some work coming up during the bye week. No preview this week, of course, because of the bye week, but said you're working on something.
Yeah, I've been doing some stuff. I was doing it earlier today before I got on, looking at quarterback play at Florida and how that sort of tracked with how they performed. And, I know people are really going to point at the defense and say, hey, that's really improved. But it turns out it is the most important position on the field. And so sort of giving people an idea of what to look for and why that's important for the schedule coming up, given what we've already seen so far in the college football season.
All right. There we go. Look for that. readandreaction.com out there for Will. Read and Reaction on YouTube as well with him and Nick there for Stand Up and Holler. When's the next episode of that, Will?
Yep. So we'll record tomorrow night. So it'll be out there Wednesday or Thursday. And Nick always has sort of a unique take on these sorts of things. So I'll get to braid him a little bit. It'll be fun.
Later this week, I'll have the guys from Gator Game Day on. So Seth and J Bud going to join me right here. We'll go to some film, to some some analytics there. Take a different look right here. So should be pretty good stuff there later on. Next episode of Gators Breakdown. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Gators Breakdown. Will Miles, one more time at Reading Reaction. I am the host right here, David Waters. You can find me on social media at GatorDave_SEC. Guys and girls out there, thank you for joining us on this episode of Gators Breakdown.